Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. First and foremost, Happy New Year. Hope you guys had a great Christmas and all of that. But yeah, back into the swing of things. And I think we'll start with a prediction video. Gervonta Tank Davis versus Hector Luis Garcia. Of course, this fight goes down on the 7th of January, takes place in Washington in the Capital One Arena, and I believe that this fight is on Showtime pay-per-view in America. No idea what channel this is on in the UK. But yeah, this prediction is not going to be super in-depth like I usually do, just a quick video. But before we start, I will say this. Obviously, recently Tank Davis was accused of domestic battery, domestic violence, whatever you want to call it. Recent news has come out indicating that Tank Davis may have been innocent. Essentially, the female who made the claim has basically run them back, and she's kind of now denying that it ever happened. And, you know, in my last video, I upset a lot of Tank Davis fans, which is what I expected, you know, when it comes to the boxing scene on YouTube, on social media. You know, many of these individuals, they struggle to contain their emotions. We're living in that world now where grown men are emotionally incontinent. And ultimately, if they hear something they don't like, they will throw their toys out of a pram like a petulant child. And yeah, regardless, even if Tank is innocent of these latest accusations, it still doesn't dispel what I said in the video. Tank Davis, throughout his career, has displayed, well, on numerous occasions, he's displayed unprofessionalism, missing weight, getting stripped of titles, ducking various fighters, getting in public spats with his promoter, Floyd Mayweather. Ultimately, Tank's career in the ring has been disappointing, and if you're a fan of boxing who just wants to see the best fights, you would agree. Not only that, outside the ring, regardless of his previous accusations maybe being false, Tank Davis has got in legal trouble. We've seen Tank Davis put his hands on women. Fact, go cry if you don't like it. Tank Davis right now is currently still facing legal issues over a hit and run where he fled the scene. And yeah, I believe that the victim was a pregnant lady. So, I mean, if that's the type of guy that you rock with and that you man defend, that's on you. P.S. My man, Tank Davis, on camera kissing Adrian Broner. That's the level of person we're dealing with here. So yeah, I mean, Tank is what he is outside the ring. However, he's got a fight coming up. He does have a fight coming up against Hector Luis Garcia. And quite frankly, this is a somewhat interesting fight. I'm not going to go over the top, but it's somewhat interesting. It's certainly more interesting than Rolly Romero, Tank's last opponent, who, quite frankly, I think that guy found his boxing license in the bottom of a Cheerios box. The guy can't box for shit, he can't box eggs. So yeah, Hector Luis Garcia is a much better fighter than Rolly Romero. Not as big, not as strong, but a better fighter all round. He's got a good amateur pedigree as well. I just think he's a better fighter all round than Rolly Romero. So this is a step up from that fight. And also Hector Luis Garcia is the champion, the WBA champion at super featherweight. I think he's the full WBA champion as well. And he is coming off a couple of good wins in 2022. Of course, he beat Chris Colbert in what was an upset at the time. Quite frankly, I never rated Chris Colbert all that highly. To me, Chris Colbert is the perfect example of style over substance. You know, if you have a bit of athleticism, you wear your shorts like a skirt, you know, like Chris Colbert does. You dye your hair pink. Sometimes that's all it takes to fool a boxing fan, and they'll believe you're the real deal. But yeah, Hector Luis Garcia, he exposed Chris Colbert for what he is. A guy who looks stylish, but in all reality, he's not really that good. At best, I would say Chris Colbert is fringe level, maybe just outside the top 10 at best. He's that sort of guy. He's not terrible, don't get it twisted, but he's nothing special. He's nothing special. And Hector Luis Garcia proved that in that fight. And yeah, after that, Hector Luis Garcia then went on to fight Roger Gutierrez, who was the WBA champion at the time. Gutierrez was he's a pretty strong boxer puncher, pretty big for the weight, hits relatively hard, does the basics well. And yeah, Hector Luis Garcia won that fight quite comfortably. And yeah, in my opinion, that was a better win than Chris Colbert. So, 2022 Hector Luis Garcia, he made a name for himself and he proved that he's a pretty good super featherweight. However, the issue here is he is moving up in weight. That has to be said. I know he's taller and longer than Tank Davis, but again, he's never fought at 135 before. Tank Davis has on numerous occasions. In fact, Tank's fought at 140 before. So Hector Luis Garcia going up in weight, that will be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see how he handles that new weight. Maybe he struggles with the power of Tank Davis. But alternatively, maybe it gives him more energy. Hector Luis Garcia is a high output fighter. Maybe it actually might make his gas tank a bit better, because of the fact that he's not cutting as much weight. That's also possible. It could go both ways. But yeah, when I look at Hector Luis Garcia, I see a pressure fighter. Of course, Hector Luis Garcia is a southpaw. He will maraud forwards. He throws a lot of punches. He's quite comfortable at mid-range and on the inside. He's a good body puncher with both hands. I like the way he mixes up his combinations. Punches in bunches. And yeah, that proved to be very effective against Chris Colbert, who couldn't keep him at arm's length, and he couldn't contend with him on the inside. And it also proved effective against the boxer puncher in Roger Gutierrez. But against Tank Davis, I think that Hector Luis Garcia's style may be a little more susceptible, to be honest. One thing about Hector Luis Garcia that I want to see more of in this fight, he needs to, in my opinion, tighten up that guard, because in particular against Chris Colbert, he was kind of walking in, leading off with hooks to the body, wide punches, and he left a huge gap up the middle. The only issue was for Chris Colbert, he couldn't really take advantage because he can't punch, and Hector had him in his place. But there's a lot of space through the middle when Hector Luis Garcia comes forwards. He holds his hands quite far apart, and again, he usually leads, or very often he leads, with wide punches, hooks to the head or body. And that could spell disaster, because Tank Davis, as we know, has got a really good lead uppercut. And also the overhand left as well, as we saw against Rolly Romero. He could easily catch Hector Luis Garcia coming in with that sort of shot. So for me, Hector Luis Garcia, if he's to stand any chance of winning this fight, he needs to tighten up defensively, majorly in this fight. Not only that, he can't afford to walk down Tank Davis without a jab. I think Hector Luis Garcia needs to keep Tank as occupied as possible in this fight, and maintaining that jab as he's coming forwards. Not only is it a good way to maintain range and try and stay out of Tank's wheelhouse, but again, it just gives Tank something else to think about. Maybe if you're throwing that jab consistently while coming forwards, Tank can't quite get his feet set to counter or land a barrage of punches, because that is one thing about Tank that I've noticed. Tank Davis, he generates his power flat-footed. He's not a big puncher off the back foot. We saw that against Isaac Cruz. If you can keep Tank continuously moving backwards, he can't hurt you, in my opinion. Well, he certainly never hurt Isaac Cruz doing that, and arguably, that fight was very close. And honestly, I think that Hector should actually take a look at that fight with Isaac Cruz and Tank, because especially in the first half of that fight, Isaac was nice and compact, very tight guard, and he was jabbing his way forwards, closing the distance very quickly. And he actually had a lot of success with his jab in the first half of that fight. But Isaac Cruz kind of abandoned his jab as that fight was playing out. So yeah, I think the jab for Hector Luis Garcia could be very important in this fight, to try and neutralize what Tank Davis does back. But ultimately, for Hector Luis Garcia, I don't think he can really box Tank. I think Tank would be too quick-handed and more than likely would land for bigger shots and potentially knock out Hector Luis Garcia. He needs to pressure Tank. He needs to make Tank take the back foot in this fight. But obviously that in itself leaves a lot of risks against a quick-handed puncher like Tank. So he needs to cover up. He needs to have a tight guard, nice and compact, and boxing behind that jab as he's coming forwards. You know, again, take a look at the Isaac Cruz fight. And yeah, I think this fight is honestly going to be the typical Tank Davis fight. I think for as long as this fight plays out, Tank Davis will look very human. I think you're going to see him pull that jab like he's done in recent fights, trying to measure the distance, trying to open the guard, or at least trying to bait a movement or bait something out of Garcia, and he'll try and throw the single left-hand counter down the pipe, maybe the lead uppercut, or even the check right hook. You know, he'll try and land single shots on Hector Luis Garcia, and as he's doing that, I can see a scenario where he gets outworked in quite a lot of rounds, like he did against Rolly Romero, like he did against Leo Santa Cruz, and against Isaac Cruz. In the last sort of like 2 to 3 years, Tank Davis has started to lose a lot of rounds in fights. Yes, he's bailed himself out, but his activity levels can be taken advantage of, and we've seen that in numerous fights, but he's just had the power to bail himself out kind of thing. But yeah, ultimately, that is something that Hector Luis Garcia needs to take advantage of in this fight. But the main thing, obviously, is try to minimize the opportunities that you give Tank Davis to counter. As for Tank Davis, I want to see him be more expressive in this fight with his offense. I actually want to see him go toe-to-toe at times with Hector Luis Garcia. I want to see more of that Tank Davis from the Jose Pedraza fight way back in the day, where he would hold his feet and actually let his shots go. I think he can afford to do that against Hector Luis Garcia. Hector's got a good work rate, but he's not a particularly big puncher, and again, as I said, when he opens up, he leaves a lot of openings through the middle. I think if Tank holds his feet and exchanges with Hector Luis Garcia, you could see him light Garcia up on the inside and at mid-range. He's got the quicker hands, the shorter arms, he's the more dynamic puncher, and the uppercuts in particular, in those exchanges, could be very important for Tank Davis. I want to see Tank Davis be more offensive in this fight and not be solely that kind of back foot counter puncher, you know, who pours with his jab, who looks for one perfect shot, because eventually that's not going to work. So I want to see Tank actually try to, I don't know, I guess I want to see Tank show us what he has offensively. You know, that's what I want to see from Tank Davis. Will that happen? I'm not so sure. More than likely, I think this will be your regular Tank Davis fight. You'll see Hector Luis Garcia start quite well. Maybe after 4 or 5 rounds, Hector Luis Garcia will be ahead, purely based on work rate. And again, I think this fight more than likely will be similar to the Leo Santa Cruz fight or the Rolly Romero fight, where Tank Davis is losing rounds. It's a close fight in regards to punches landed. You know, maybe he's getting outworked, and I think he'll just land a perfect shot on Hector Luis Garcia. Again, I reiterate, I think Garcia's downfall is those wide hands. He keeps his guard quite wide apart at times, and when he opens up, primarily he opens up with hooks, and especially when they go to the body, he's leaving a huge opening. So I can see Tank coming over the top with his overhand left, or even landing a lead uppercut, you know. But yeah, could be a decent fight. We'll see if Hector comes to win. We'll see. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. I'm not expecting too much from this fight, but I am somewhat intrigued. Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy. Peace.